when I asked you about newspapers the other day, you told me, no, we don't read newspapers anymore. If we get our information, basically we get our news from either digital platforms, social media, and then we just go in and browse on a specific website. It's quite true about magazines as well. I believe today a lot of people get, maybe they're subscribed to a digital copy of magazines. I personally love to look at magazine covers. I think this is the biggest element on a magazine that captivates me. Now, honestly, anytime I go grocery shopping and I'm in line, I just stare about all the magazine covers that are in Walmart on the magazine stands, basically because I teach how to design a magazine cover. And I'm always curious to see what are some things that have changed, maybe in terms of design, or what is the dominant element. So one thing I always tell my students, anytime you look on a magazine cover, there has to be something that catches your eye, right? Sometimes it's basically the banner or the logo, the name of the magazine. Maybe you already have developed a relationship with it. Sometimes it's a visual, it's a picture that communicates those more than 1,000 words. And you're like, man, what happened with this artist? It's something that everyone's talking about. Sometimes it's a headline, a spicy, intriguing headline. So basically, all these things that I have just listed for you, they are things that magazines have become. In the very beginning, again, magazines did not look like that, quite honestly. So let's go back to the very beginning, to the 17th century in France. It's believed that magazines for the first time appeared in a connection to France. And the name magazine that we have today comes from the French language, which is magazine. And honestly, this is the same name that we use in my country. So for a storehouse, we would use the word magazine. Instead of S, we would have Z. And when you think of it, in a storehouse, you can find a little bit of everything, kind of a combination of a lot of elements. So that's what probably a magazine was associated to during those times. Now, in the very beginning, magazines were considered just extremely boring, basically because very few people had access to them. So mainly they focused on literature and essays. They were long, and only intelligent people had access to them, because it took some understanding for you to try to read a poem or a prose and understand what the author meant. So it was more philosophical. Later, obviously that changed and they became very categorized. But the target audience during that time were higher class people and intelligent people. Again, one of the reasons was because most intelligent people were able to read, while the middle class and workers, they were not able to. Well, maybe some of them were, but it was not very popular at the time. So in the United States, magazines started appearing in the 18th century. And I want you to pay attention to one detail. In the 18th century, there were about 12 magazines operating in the US, just 12. Think of it, nationwide, 12 magazines. Now, the following slide, you'll find out that by the 19th century, they were over 500 magazines. So you see, they realized that this medium is quite captivating to the audience. So if we're going to make some changes and adjust it and give the audience what they want, maybe people are going to become more interested in it. Now, basically, they were so few magazines because of a lot of reasons. One of them was because the postal costs were high. And again, I just talked to you about the rate of illiteracy. Not a lot of people were able to read. So in order for you to be able to understand what's in a magazine, you can't just look at visuals. And during that time, visuals were not quite dominant on the page either. So the main cause was the actual magazine. It was boring. It was just a lot of words, no visuals, nothing captivating. It was just, long pieces of text or body copy spread on the pages. So a better approach came onto the scene sometimes during the mid-19th century, when publishers started using illustrations to complement the article. So they finally realized, if we want to connect a story and make it intriguing to the audience, we definitely need to join that story, or to have that story joined by a visual, by something that will connect and will illustrate maybe a piece of the story that the story is not in words. So started targeting specific groups, women, doctors, snooty rich people. So finally, magazines started to fragmentate their information and kind of departmentalize it basically to the target audience and to the needs of the audience. So again, by the 19th century, there were over 500 magazines in the United States. So that tells you that publishers saw the impact of this medium in educating the masses and in selling. I mean, we keep talking about mass media as being this great institution, you know, the fourth estate in a country, but mass media is also a business. So people that start running a business related to mass media, they want to make money, and you make money with ads. So a little later, what was the reason to that is that the Postal Act in 1879 lowered the costs to lower the rates to mail things. So a lot of people started having more access to magazines and made it more affordable for the working class, which was an incredible benefit at that time. Now, also improvements in transportation and production technology. So now with, you know, the bigger trucks, publishing houses were able to distribute magazines to a lot of regions faster, easier, and people that before didn't have access to it, now they were. And finally, ads. Remember, I just talked to you about the importance of placing advertisements because you want to sell content. You're wanting to sell your business, you know, the product you are creating. So when ads started being placed in the magazines, that's when they started making those big bucks. And obviously that's always intriguing, and it always motivates you to do more and to make more. So a following reason of why magazines started raising in popularity and become extremely captivating to the audience was the fact that now they were placed in a variety of places. So remember, you know, during the 18th century, only a few people had access to them. Highly intelligent, you know, the content was based on literature and essays, just very narrow. Now you were able to find magazines and drugstores and magazines, and it was just easier for you to access the information and see them, come in contact with the product. Also, publishers drop the price for magazines. So if you're wondering, okay, the real price of a magazine, let's say it's $10, but publishers drop the price, let's say, to $7. So you're wondering, how are they making money? You see, now, since the circulation had grown so much, they were actually making more money than if they were to maintain that initial price, the real cost of the product. So again, you see how things were balancing out, basically helping this medium become extremely popular. So with that, circulation grew, and when an ad person comes to you, or a business comes to you, your medium, and asks you, okay, I would like to place an ad in your magazine. What's your circulation rate? The moment you tell them, you know, this product reaches over 1 million people on a monthly basis, obviously that looks intriguing, because if they place an ad on a dominant page, about 1 million people will be able to visualize it and potentially build a relationship with that product and be interested in purchasing it. So circulation matters a lot. Now today, I'm assuming a lot of you, just like me, recently I actually received a magazine in my mailbox, and I was like, where did it come from? I didn't subscribe, nothing. So you see, sometimes magazines do that. They send in a way gift copies to potential customers, to people they think would be interested in this product, in hopes of you subscribing to the product and potentially purchasing it and helping them with those rates. So to just give you an idea, that's what magazines look like in the 1800s. Which one looks more captivating to you? Which one do you think would convince you to pick it up and give it a read?
The first one.
The Saturday Evening Post?
Yeah.
Why? I'm curious.
The cover is way more interesting. It's got pictures on it. It's got people on it. Other than the other one. Yeah, the other ones are kind of boring. They
Yes.
look like bills.
That's an extremely good point that you're making. So you see, a visual definitely communicates a lot of content. communicate something. That's why one of the dominant or one of the main suggestion I have for my students when they design these magazine covers, not these, but when they do their projects, is that they pick a visual that communicates something. Don't just pick something that is boring and is not talking back at you. Pick something where the person on the cover or the illustration has a message to tell you, has a message to communicate. Eye contact is extremely important on a visual, on a magazine cover. So yeah, but you see in 1821, they were quite smart, realizing that, okay, you know, visuals are probably going to bring some popularity to our product. So definitely magazines have went, you know, through a lot of changes and they look completely different today. But again, with technology and changes and improvements, that's how it all happened. So let's move on to the muckrakers era. Now, the late 1800s, it's quite interesting that magazines were writing articles attacking corruption in businesses, in corporations, and in the government. So if you think of it, you're like, that sounds a lot more like newspapers, like reporters that would work for a newspaper, which is true. So it's interesting that at that time, that was the style that writers for magazines endorsed. Basically, my assumption is that there was a topic that was extremely popular. Everyone was talking about it, and probably corruption was a big problem in the society at the time. So magazines felt like, you know, they had to endorse that area in talking about that. Now, today, you will most never find a story in a magazine that talks about corruption or attacking any businesses or the government. Now, it could probably happen a little bit with the government, but never with businesses. And it's very simple to understand why. Because if they depend on a certain business for ad placement, they are going to be nice to that business. They will never, you know, attack their reputation or attack anything that they have done. So during the World War I, this era of, you know, reporters that were working for magazines were attacking corrupt systems ended, and general interest magazines started to grow, something similar to what we have today. And also photojournalism became big during this time. So now magazines didn't just have a visual on the cover or just a basic illustration. A lot of stories were accompanied by photos. So the pictures were powerful and striking, something that we know of magazines today, with, you know, paparazzi or these reporters that were always interested in, or photojournalists always interested in the spicy information or in the spicy events that people were involved in. Now, in terms of magazine categories, obviously you cannot place all magazines in one category. So I just mentioned to you that the other week I received a magazine copy and it had something with agriculture. Okay, it was promoting local businesses that do farming and grow their own fresh fruits and vegetables and so on. So obviously, if I were to compare this magazine that I received in my mailbox with a fashion style magazine, they must look different. Would you agree with me? Because if they don't, then you would be like, okay, who's the target audience for this magazine? So when I go back, you see, I keep mentioning to you that when my students have to do this design for a magazine cover, the first question I always have for them is, who is your target audience? How are you going to figure out who are going to be my buyers or the people interested in this product? Now, magazines or categories that magazines fall under are several ones. So let's start with the first one. The first one is called the consumer magazines. And basically, it's called consumer magazines because all ads in the magazine promote general products that the general public needs. Things that, you know, most of us need, like shampoo and soap, cars and clothes, things that are a necessity. Trade magazines are a little bit more specific, okay? So in a trade magazine, you would find ads that focus on a very narrow category. For instance, if we were to talk about, let's say, Utah Trooper, okay? You won't find in Utah Trooper advertising, what should I say? Advertise soccer balls or soccer shoes. you will probably find things that pertain specifically to this group of people that are interested in this magazine, okay? Anyone that relates to the military, or shooting and bulletproofs and vests, just things or products that pertain specifically to this target audience. And finally, non-commercial magazines. If you were to ask me, those are the most boring. Why? Because they don't have any visuals, they don't have any ads. I am actually subscribed to a couple of those since I am a scholar and I do research. I'm always interested to see what other people do in terms of research. And anytime I receive a magazine, let's say from AJMC or from CCA, they're always just full of text. You know, it's just a basic headline and then a lot of text that explains what happened during a previous meeting or previous conference and what's going to happen next. So journal articles and company newsletters, they don't have any ads because that's not their interest. They're not selling the magazine. Most of the times, if you're subscribed to that business, or like myself, I'm subscribed to this academic organization and I pay a fee every year. So then I get these newsletters for free, but basically, you know, I pay for that. So in terms of specialized editions, this is something quite interesting that I want you guys to pay attention to. So some businesses, magazine businesses, they decide what's the best interest in terms of reaching more people. Okay, so specialized editions usually kind of fall under three categories. The first one is called the regional editions. And what that happens is that one large national brand magazine is going to publish, you know, a copy in different areas of the country. But when they do, they will focus on certain things that pertain to that region. For instance, if you were to publish a magazine in Colorado, for instance, obviously you're going to advertise maybe snowing and mountains and things that Colorado is known for. Now, if you were to print that same magazine in Florida, you're not going to advertise what's in Colorado. You're going to advertise things that makes Florida people interested in. So I'm assuming you're getting what regional editions of magazines are. They are published, you know, it's again, one magazine, let's just say the name Rolling Stones, okay, published in Colorado to focus on specific things that pertain to that region. And then if it were to publish in Florida during that same month, a lot of the stories will be the same, but in terms of ads or even stories, you will have things that specifically pertain to the region that it's published in. Split run editions, they usually feature regional advertisements. So it's kind of close to regional editions, except with regional editions, content of stories also focuses on the region, while split run editions focuses on advertisements, local advertisers. So again, for instance, there's a restaurant in Mississippi. When I used to live in Mississippi, the name of the restaurant is Nukes. Okay, it's a great place to eat. If you ever have a chance to travel there, try it out. And if I were to run a magazine in Missouri, I would not be able to advertise Nukes because I haven't seen Nukes in Missouri. I don't know. Do you have this restaurant here, guys? Anywhere where you're from? I know we don't have it in Cape. I've never seen it in St. Louis. So you see,
we have them in Maryland.
In Maryland. Okay, yes, I should go to Maryland for a Nukes lunch sometimes. Thank you, Mackenzie. So you see, that's the importance of understanding which ads to place to make sure you're not talking to an audience that has nothing to do with a place that you're advertising. And finally, demographic editions. This is quite interesting because magazines or ads placed in magazines that aim or analyze demographics, they're usually very specific for the needs of the consumers. Okay, so for instance, everyone knows that there is, California. There are regions in California where they're extremely rich. Okay, so if you were to place ads for that specific region, you would be interested to understand the demographics, or who are those people that live there? What do they eat? What restaurants do they go to? What do they wear? What do they like to talk about? So basically, you would advertise some things that again pertain to the demographics, to the general public that lives in that region. Now, if we were to compare Cape Girardeau with, let's say, San Diego, those are two complete cities with completely different demographics. So placing the same ads in both of these cities would be a big mistake. That's why every time magazine designers or producers, whenever they start thinking about where to place the ads or what specifically am I interested in terms of this edition for the magazine, this is extremely important to consider. Now let's talk a little bit about magazine economics. So magazines use demographics to target the potential market, and that's something I always remind my students about. If you think advertising doesn't impact you, then you have to really ask yourself, well, how do I end up buying the clothes that I buy? How do I end up eating at the restaurants that I do? How do I end up buying the smartphone that I have or the computer that I'm using? So research actually shows that on a daily basis, I think a regular person comes into contact with over 5,000 commercials a day. 5,000 ads, and they could be, like me walking into school and seeing one of you wearing Nike shoes. That's an ad, okay? Or me driving on the way to school and seeing a billboard advertising a local restaurant in town. That's another ad. Or me opening my screen on the computer and trying to get on my email, and ads are popping up on the screen. Those are ads as well. So basically, we are extremely important to businesses, okay? We're extremely important to media businesses, for sure, because they're always interested to understand what do they like? What category would they fall under? What are some things that would intrigue this audience, okay? So until I became a mom, I was never interested in things that pertain to children, feeding or bottles or anything like that. Well, later, that's my life, right? So that's something that you always have to understand, where your public matures or how your consumers change and maybe move from one category to another, and how you're able to reach them according to their needs. So in terms of magazine economics, if we were to talk about age, okay, one magazine that specifically focuses on age, for instance, 17 triggers teenage girls. So they would be the demographics that magazines would be interested in. If we were to talk about a magazine that focuses on gender, for instance, Maxim is one that focuses specifically for men. So if you were to go in Maxim, just start looking through the magazine, you will not find ads that don't pertain to this category. You will find things that are specifically designated for this group or for these demographics. Race, ebony for African Americans, religion, Christianity Today. So do you think you'd ever find an ad about Buddhism in Christianity Today, for instance? Never, because that's not the demographics that the magazine reaches, where the target audience, the consumers, won't be interested in something like that. So that's something that I wanted you to pay attention to. Wealth, fortune for rich people, or maybe people that want to be rich. Occupation, the mailbox for school teachers. I bet a lot of school teachers have access to this magazine and find it very useful. Educational level, New Yorker for the cultural elite. So you see, we are important to the audience. And if you were to ask yourself, okay, what category do I fall under? What would be the ads that would intrigue me or would captivate me? Now, basically, if I were to come in as a magazine, as a producer for a magazine, my first questions would be, okay, how old are you? What do you like to do? What are your career plans? Where would you like to go? What are the places you go to? What are the clothes you're wearing? The technology you're using? So the more detail about the target audience, the better, because you are able to reach them specifically and extremely narrow. And that's how businesses make their money. Now, in terms of fragmentation, you see, let me move this out of the way. This is very interesting right here. So the way magazines specialize, it starts from a very general category. For instance, sports, okay? Then under sports, there are a lot of styles of sports that people practice, okay? So I see some of you are playing volleyball, right? Some of you are playing basketball, soccer. My husband, for instance, is a martial art professional fighter. So obviously under sports, there are different categories. Now, each of that category can be fragmented or can be divided into smaller categories. So let's just take running, for instance. Running, again, is part of the sports category, but under running, there are multiple groups of people that fall under different categories. For instance, people that are over 50, they would be one target audience. Men, a separate target audience. Women, completely separate target audience. Pros. So if you were to go through a magazine that has men as their target audience, you will never probably find ads with sports bras for women, right? You would be like, okay, who's going to be interested in buying this? Or you won't find products that pros are using in comparison to people that are over 50. So you see where I'm going with it? That's one very important aspect that marketers specifically are doing through magazines and through ads. Now, what's the impact of advertising? So about half of all magazines' revenue comes from advertisers. If you were to look, when you go next time to Walmart, just pick one of the magazines and start looking through it, you will barely find the story. Most of the things that are there are just purely ads. Sometimes that makes me mad. I don't know about you, but I'm like, I want to read something, I want to read the story and see something that's interesting in what's going on in the music world or the fashion world today. And all I see is just ads. Well, there's something extremely interesting now. A lot of the stories now are disguised or they're placed in advertorials, which imply something that's called product placement. And that's what it stands for. So let's say you open a magazine and you see a story on Taylor Swift and how she's taking care of her face, okay? The makeup she's using and how healthy her skin looks and how beautiful she is and so on. Now, at first you might be thinking, okay, this is just a general story on how Taylor Swift is caring for her skin. Basically, it's not. It's an advertorial or it's a product placement where you're using somebody that's popular and influential, someone that would have something to say to the target audience and the target audience would pay attention to, while this person is advertising or is trying to sell something to those consumers. So a lot of magazines do that today. If next time you go through it, just find most of the stories have a lot of advertorials. And that has become extremely popular in Instagram, in stories. I mean, obviously, if you're following somebody that's popular and famous, you will see how they are promoting a lot, either their own business, their own firms, own products that they're making, or somebody else's product that they're making. So I mentioned to you about this in the very beginning of today's presentation, that magazines do not focus at all on criticism, specifically on companies or businesses, basically because they depend on them. So there is a case study, if you have some time to read it and just browse and find it online. The CEO of IBM was upset with an article in Fortune, okay, in the magazine that's called Fortune, and they pulled their ads from the magazine, and the magazine lost $6 million. So that's extremely sad, but that's when you do not mess with the people that basically support your business. So it's quite interesting that, magazines have to be careful about it. Now, in terms of trends, okay, again, I kind of touched on it throughout today's lecture. There are lots of magazines that only promote a paid circulation, where their audience or their consumers are subscribed, and every month they receive a copy. So it's either subscriptions or single copy sales, okay? That's one way of them making their money. A second way would be controlled circulation, which is how I got the magazine in my mailbox. And I was like, okay, they probably think I would be part of the target audience. They probably analyzed me somehow, social media. We provide so much information today that just 20 years ago, people had to pay for this type of information. And now they can just scroll through and find out what I'm cooking, what I'm having for dinner, where I'm shopping, where I'm spending my weekends. So the moment they understand who I am, it's extremely easy for them to figure out what are the things I like and the things I don't like. So I was curious why they sent me that, agricultural magazine. I've had a little garden this spring, and maybe that's how they triggered me. But they get the magazines for free, so they mail the magazines to the audience, potentially hoping that the target audience would be interested in them and finally be convinced by the business, by the magazines, to start subscribing to them. And finally, webazines, which are online editions of a magazine. I like to browse through them as well. Now, even digital copies of magazines, you have to pay for them. You can access them for free, or maybe you can just access, let's say, the front cover and maybe 1 or 2 pages. But if you want to have access to the full copy of the digital version, you would have to pay a fee. Usually the fee is much lower than the fee for a physical copy, but again, it brings money. So that's something extremely popular and used. Well, it looks like that's it about magazines. Any questions to me? If you don't have any questions, now I have something interesting for us to do. So you still see my screen, right? Just making sure.
Yes.
I had it here. Let me take you. Okay, I had it, but I guess I closed it. I will show you a couple of magazine covers. Not this one. Magazines. And you guys will look at them and you tell me what the target audience is. So just by looking at the cover, let's try to understand, who is this for? Let me move this out of the way. Okay, so here's the cover. So let's figure out who's the target audience, and let's break it down in the smallest category that we can. So what would be the first
People
one?
interested in the film industry.
Say it again, please.
People interested in the entertainment industry.
Okay, that's the wide category. Perfect. Okay, let's break it down even more. Do you think females or males?
I can't, it's hard to say because I feel like it's a general audience.
Okay.
Because even though Will Smith's on the cover, it does talk about a female star as well in one of the bubbles on the cover. So it could lean to both sides.
You have actually touched on a very, very important component. At times our categories can blend in together. So at times, one very important aspect for businesses to understand is to always have a target audience. But it's nothing wrong with shooting both at women and at men. That's nothing wrong with that. It's actually very smart. But if I were to ask you about the age, what do you think the age of the target audience for this magazine cover would be?
Adults, usually probably 18 to anywhere above that, probably about 18 to 34, the main target demographic of most films and stuff.
I agree completely. So if I were to ask you, do you think teenage girls would pick this up?
No, they wouldn't really have that much of an interest.
Yep, great. Okay, let's move on.
Maybe if they're a fan.
Maybe what?
Maybe if they're a fan of someone who's interviewed in there, but outside of that, nah.
I agree. Okay, let's talk about this one now. Home cooking. Who do you think would be the target audience for this one?
People who like to cook.
Or maybe eat, or maybe people who like to eat. What other people?
Yeah.
For sure.
Probably older women,
middle-aged.
So.
Okay, probably older women. Okay, so let me ask you.
Like a housewife.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, that's all I have to say. Like housewives, like stay-at-home moms, the ones who cook.
Perfect point. For sure. So you probably a businesswoman that's career oriented and works full-time for a company, and maybe just eats out and has nothing to do with cooking, this would probably not look intriguing at all. For sure. So you see, that's how businesses try to create the covers and make sure they meet the needs of that target audience. Okay, let's look at the next one. Let's check this one out. What do you think about this?
I'd say that's targeted towards men.
Why?
It's, well, not just because it has Ryan Reynolds on the front, but it does talk about like his hairstyle, like his secrets to it.
Men who are into fashion.
Perfect points, guys. So you see, remember when I told you, you look at a cover and you understand the elements. You try to analyze what those elements are. Now, basically a cover, a magazine cover is made of 5 dominant things. One is the banner. So it's this effortless, the name or the logo, the masthead. It could have, multiple names, but that's what it goes under. A second element is the visual, okay, the picture. And the picture should always communicate something, okay? If you look at this picture, is it communicating something to you? What is it telling you when you look at it? I feel like it's almost saying I'm sexy and I know it. What do you think? It's like, I've got the secret and I'm going to share the secret with you. So if he would have just been posing, just a regular pose, extremely serious face, looking out at the cover, you probably would have not had the same impact. So that's element number 2. Element number 3 are headlines. But if I were to be a little more specific, would be the third element is the dominant headline, the one that has the larger font, the one that pertains to the dominant story and to the dominant visual. The next element are the following headlines, and then it's the color. Color for headlines, background color, color of the visual, and so on. So these elements have to create a full project where all the elements should contribute together to make this as something the target audience would commit to and would be curious about. Okay, good job. Let's look at the next one. Let's have this one out. Okay, what do you think about this one?
This is very much oriented towards people interested in nature conservation. It's very specific for that.
Do you think we can talk about families here? Maybe families with kids? How?
Most likely.
Okay, how? How do I know that?
Because the main focus of the cover is a child.
Perfect. So you see, if I were to put this magazine side by side to this one, with this one, most definitely they focus on completely 2 different target audiences, right?
Yes.
So that's how you figure things out. That's why we talked about magazine fragmentation today. That's why it's so important to understand who the demographics are. The demographics for this cover probably will never be interested in something like this. Now, there could be an exception. Since this is for men, some of the men that are probably married and have families and their wives are into traveling or checking out reservations and natural parks and taking families out could fall under this category. But most of the times, these 2 demographics would never meet. They would rarely have something in common. So ads, if we were to place ads in this nurture in nature, what types of ads do you think would work there? I'm curious.
Family restaurants, RV parks. That's
I agree completely. What about effortless? What type of ads do you think would work?
Oh, hair care product.
alone.
Hair.
Stuff like that.
Maybe working out techniques or how to get, better in shape.
Protein supplements.
Yeah, definitely. Good. Perfect. You guys are going on the right way. You know, you understand perfectly what I'm talking about. And the last one, let's check this one out. What do you think about this one? Who do you think would be the target audience?
People really our age, college age people,
Okay.
younger, high school, college.
Why?
First, the main focus is a younger person around our age, and basically the design of the cover is
For
very.
sure. Now
Yeah.
look at the banner, the title of the magazine, Social Circuit. What do you think it focuses on? What do you think the dominant stories or the dominant content would be on?
Probably like
About the lives of people our age.
Okay, maybe connections.
like city life or like club life, that sort of thing, as it kind of looks like it focuses on the inner city and like maybe like what trends are going to be fashionable if you go out.
For sure. What type of ads do you think would work here? What makes a college student interested today? What type of ads would work here?
Clothes,
Anything that you
streaming
see,
services.
anything this person on the cover is wearing, right? Anything, you know, the necklace, the shoes, the pants, the jacket, the glasses, anything that you see there, it's almost like an advertorial, like a product placement. Anything that is there would probably work really well in advertising, specifically for this target audience. Okay, what else do you think would work well?
I'd say like it'd probably have like the new trendy places to go or go to eat, or like when I say trendy places, like places to take pictures at. I kind of think of like California when I see something like that, how they always have like the painted walls that are very popular to go to take pictures, or like the very trendy places to eat.
Those were my favorite. When I traveled to California 2 springs ago, the painted walls were amazing. So I perfectly understand what you're talking about. Now, let me ask you, what was your favorite cover? If you were to pick one, what do you think was the best one that I've shown to you?
This one.
This one? Do you think it looks professional? Like if you were to see it in Walmart, do you think it would look like something that you would see in Walmart?
I don't know. I mean, anytime I go to Walmart and I do see magazines, it's either like Reader's Digest or like the cooking one. And maybe sometimes it'll have like, I don't know, a famous celebrity on the cover. But this looks like a magazine I would see in Barnes and Noble.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Now let me show you the last one and ask you, here's the last one. Would this be something that you could potentially see in Walmart? Let's give it a second. Okay.
Yeah.
Why?
Because I feel like I've definitely seen something like that.
It's probably, do you think the color, the background, the combination of the elements?
It's less I don't know, I guess unique. It's more uniform. You could tell that this is just in a series, especially by the way the title is put over it.
Yes. By the way,
Yes.
all these magazines, perfect. You guys did an excellent job for sure. All these magazines were designed by this class that I'm teaching. It's called MC221 Media Elements, where I teach 5 different Adobe apps, Adobe software apps, and one of them is Photoshop. And the students that did these covers, they used Photoshop to design them. And I always try to save different copies. This was one of the best projects that I have received. So basically, when you look at it, you should ask yourself, okay, does this look professional? Would it look like something I would be interested to pick up and read? And this definitely meets the standard of color and intrigue and the visual that communicates content. And then the headlines, the really nice job just placing them. You see this gray color here, gray on the bottom. So it's all, everything is placed in a balanced spot. That's something I always encourage my students. It's when you do design, it's like you start a circle and your intention is to always close that circle to make sure your elements make one whole really nice picture. So definitely, I'm very proud when I receive projects like that.